All right, welcome to Madseason Sports. We're gonna be interviewing Steve Robertson tonight. Teddy, how you doing?
Man, good.
You excited?
I am, man. It's going to be a big week, or has been a big week already, and not to mention they, State and Auburn play this Saturday, which should be interesting.
There's a lot to unpack with this.
It is, and I'm excited to hear what Steve's got to say because I'm sure he's got a lot.
Yeah. Let's not waste any time. Let's get him on the phone.
Okay.
Hello.
Hey, Steve. This is Teddy with Madseason Sports.
Hey, Teddy. How you doing?
Good, man. We got Derek McCoy here with us. Just wanted to, welcome you on. Thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it. And
yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Well, man, I know you've been busy over the last 24 hours or so with John Cohen leaving for Auburn. I know you've talked about it, and just feel free that on this show that if you need to have a Steve Spurrier moment and slam your visor, feel free to.
Cool.
But we're interested to hear what you've got to say. I do have to ask you though, have you been busier covering this or busier on a signing day?
Well, the thing about signing day is there's kind of like a clock. It's like when it starts, you got a good idea when it's over. The stuff with this sort of stuff is like it never ends. You never know when somebody's going to call or text you back, or somebody's going to call and have some information or have questions for you. And, and so you're always on the clock. And that's the thing about being in the media. I don't think a lot of people understand, especially when you're in sports media and the way that people consume stuff on social media so rapidly. It's not a 9-to-5 job. You're never off. I mean, I guess if you work, on a city beat or something, maybe you could be. But, when you're dealing with things that are of great interest to the public, you're never off the clock.
Yeah, I imagine you're always got your foot to the gas, probably your foot to the gas and to the brake and backwards and forwards and stopping and going and wide open for 30 minutes and downtime for 5. And I couldn't imagine doing what you do, but you do a fantastic job. I've heard you on another outlet today, and man, Mississippi State sure is fortunate to have you.
Thank you very much.
But, a local, mutual friend of ours, I think his big perturbed thing was the timing of it, the week that Mississippi State plays Auburn. Do you have an opinion on that? I don't know if it bothers you, but do you have an opinion on that? Is it the timing that it was the game week between the two schools?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it hurts Auburn to wait another week to make the announcement. I understand that they want to have a football coach hired in about 30 days, and I get that. But they could kind of go about that process and do their due diligence, because chances are the coach they're going to hire is already coaching somebody else. You're not going to be able to have a formal interview. And so at the end of the day, I mean, it's just kind of a little bit uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying? It's not really a situation where I think that John Cohen's going to go give trade secrets to Auburn. I don't believe that at all. I've known John a long time. He's not that kind of person. But, I just think the optics on it look bad. I understand John's not going to be at the game, which is probably for the best. I mean, that would just be awkward for everybody. But, yeah, I don't really care for the timing too much. And, from what I understand, Auburn tried to make a hire a couple of weeks ago and thought they were close to getting the deal done. And then it didn't work out because, they had the bye week. Obviously, they would have had a chance to kind of rally the troops and install some new offensive plays and things like that. But they wanted to get an AD in place first. And now they've got him. And now they fired the football coach, And so, yeah, I think there'd have been nothing wrong with letting Harsin finish out the season, I guess. And you could have worked behind the scenes to kind of let people know that you were going to have an opening. But the reality of it is what it is, and it's not going to change the impact of the ball game. I think maybe, State gets a chance to maybe add a touchdown late. Maybe perhaps they do where they wouldn't have in the past. But, a lot of times we see, teams that lose their coaches come out with some renewed vigor. So, we might have a fight on our hands come this weekend.
Steve, this is Derek. I'm going to jump in and ask you another question related to that. With Cohen leaving, and I want you to set this kind of straight for everybody, because I think the fans automatically jump to it's money, and I have to think that there's more than that, and I definitely want somebody who has the insider knowledge on this. What is behind Cohen's thinking of this? Because he's really built a powerhouse of athletics at Mississippi State, specifically within the baseball program, of all the hires that he's made there. And what kind of impact is this going to have for, the coaching staff?
Well, I'll start with, John. I mean, John's got his own reasons, and John and I have a good relationship, but, there's some things you don't get into, the reality of it is, John's been here a long time. John's been here, was it 15 years now? And he was a player here. He was a coach here and an administrator here. And I think at some point things get a little bit stale. He hadn't said that to me. I'm just kind of speaking from my own experience. And, I think John's a competitor too, and it's like you see other people out there doing great things, and they've got a few more resources. And I know that played a role in it. I know there was some NIL frustrations with him. What's incredible about that, I think, in some respects, that it's kind of galvanized the fan base. I know that we've added over 150 new members to the Bulldog Initiative today alone, kind of based on some news that broke yesterday. And so, I think all of those kind of add up together to be, something. But no, I don't expect any other coaching changes. And I think that's one of the reasons that, Mississippi State doesn't have to rush this hire, is because, Mike Leach is going to get next year regardless. I mean, barring something totally unforeseen. You just hired 2 basketball coaches. Chris Lemonis obviously didn't have a great season last year, but I mean, he's still on solid footing. So you don't have an emergent hire, so you don't have to rush this process. And I don't think Dr. Keenum will. I think he'll take his time and get the best individual for Mississippi State athletics.
And that's kind of where I wanted to go with this, because you look at a man like Cohen and his accomplishments with State, and being the competitor that he is, you can't hate him as a Mississippi State fan, because he looks at this. I would think that he would look at this Auburn situation and look at it as a great challenge for him to take on. And I think that as a State fan and to see what he's done with that school, you would almost have to embrace that he wants to have that challenge again.
Well, maybe so. I mean, but I think the reality of it is this has happened a couple times for Mississippi State. I mean, Larry Templeton, quote, retired in 2007, and then you bring in Greg Byrne, and Greg kind of galvanizes the fan base and stays a couple of years, and then leaves and goes to Arizona, and that's home for him. But at the same time, too, it's very frustrating. You feel like you're headed into a new era. Then he leaves. They promote from within and give Scott Strickland the opportunity. Strickland's here for a handful of years, and he leaves and goes to Florida. And so I think in some respects there is some frustration that kind of carries over from both of those opportunities. And they may have been great opportunities for those individuals, but Mississippi State fans feel like, well, here we go again. We feel like we should be a destination type job in some respects, just because of the fact that, a couple of these guys are alums, and rather than go use your talents and your skills to go build up another athletic program, why not stay here? So there's some angst out there among the fan base. And, John's a guy too that's wore the uniform, it's coached and sat in the dugout, and of course, has written the big checks. And I think a lot of people thought perhaps he would be a lifer, a guy that would be here for the foreseeable future. And John's got some fans. He's got some detractors too. All leaders do. That's just kind of that's the price of doing business these days. But, I don't think that there's a lot of people at this point that can look at John and feel a real sense of gratitude. There are some, like myself, I'm very appreciative of his contributions to Mississippi State. I think there's got to be some time. There's got to be some healing before people maybe can look back and say, you know what, John did a good job for us. And I think, basketball be part of that too, because, I think he made 2 really good basketball hires. And I think maybe you look back 2 or 3 years and say, you know what, hey, we do owe a debt of gratitude to John for that. And I still think Mike Leach is the guy for Mississippi State. And I think they're probably, going to have a really good November. And I think they'll have a really good year next year. So I think the jury is still out on the John Cohen era.
Well, Steve, this is Teddy again. You're talking about. I agree with you that I think Mike Leach is still the guy. I've said that, and I've got more of an Ole Miss background, but I've said on the show before that Lane Kiffin's going to Lane Kiffin, and Mike Leach is going to be Mike Leach. And what I mean by that is Lane Kiffin just shut off. I mean, Lane Kiffin just he plays to his strengths. He plays to what he has. Where Mike Leach runs that offense regardless of his personnel. And I'm trying to tell some of my State friends who are a little bit frustrated this year. I'm like, calm down. This is at the oldest. Mike Leach's players are juniors. Do I have a point there in the fact that he doesn't have a full roster of his players?
Well, there's some truth to that. Of course, you've got the key components, with Will Rogers and some of the receivers. But,
Sure.
the talent level maybe is not exactly where you want it just yet. But you make a good point. Like I think a lot of people looked at Ole Miss and saw when Jeff Lebby left, and you're like, oh, well, Lane's going to be in some trouble. And Lane's like, hey, listen, we don't have strong quarterback play this year, but we've got a great offensive line. We've got a great stable of running backs. So we'll adjust our play calling to play to our strengths. And, Leach is going to be Leach. Leach is going to do his thing. And while Leach and Kiffin are very similar as individuals when it comes to having a big personality, as football coaches, they're very different. And, again, we'll kind of see how things play out. But yeah, I think Mike Leach is one of those guys that feels like he has a tried and true method. And now it's just about kind of adding the talent and the guys that have the skill set to execute the offense at the proficiency that he demands. And you're just not quite there yet. I think, Will Rogers has been absolutely outstanding for State. But, he has a bit of a ceiling. He's not the most mobile quarterback. He doesn't have a huge arm, but he's very accurate with the football. He runs the offense extremely well. But, there's some players around him. You got to get a little bit better. You got to recruit a little bit harder. And so I feel like that we're, if we can be 8-4 this year and you get the egg back, I think everybody's thrilled. You go 7-5, you don't get the egg back. I think there's going to be a lot of people like, oh, I don't know if it's going to work out. And so then next year becomes maybe a decision-making year.
Well, that's the world we live in now, that next year could possibly be a decision-making year. I want to backtrack to Cohen for 1 second because I did forget to ask this. I feel from the outside looking in that athletic director Cohen leaving with his baseball background, do you think that's going to have more effect on baseball more so than football?
Yeah, in some respects. I mean, John, of course, being a former player and coach, I don't know if you could ever get an athletic director who was as invested in Mississippi State baseball as John Cohen was, and I think if you're Chris Lamonis tonight, that's what you're kind of concerned about. Is like, are we going to have somebody that shares my vision for Mississippi State baseball? Now, they'll never have it as good as they had it with John. John's also on the D1 baseball committee, so he's up there kind of pleading the case for everybody. Really in every issue, because it's a personal thing for him, like the volunteer assistant coach. Well, it's not just a position on a piece of paper. He knows Kyle Cheesebro. He knows Kyle's family. And so he's advocating for someone that he knows. And so I think in that respect, things change a little bit, and there are a lot of people that feel like that, baseball has been catered to, and quite frankly, it should be, just because that's always been the crown jewel of the Bulldog athletic department. But I don't know if you're going to have another athletic director come in here and maybe share the exact same ideas about that for fundraising that maybe John Cohen did.
Yeah, Steve, that's one of the things that I think they're going to miss the most is the vision, that he had for the university. And like you said, worried about with the next AD come in, have that same vision. And that's why I was kind of curious about how the coaching staff will be affected by this. Because I think ultimately if you lose an athletic director, you lose a lot, that is intangible that they bring to the table. But it doesn't necessarily I don't think it affects the football program like a lot of the fans would think it might.
Yeah, I think the main thing is, there are a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that the casual fan doesn't know. I think that's the thing. It's probably important to understand is, the bottom line, fans just want to win, and it's like they don't really care at the end of the day who the athletic director is, as long as that person is putting winning products on the field. I think that's an important part of all of this. Is like nobody follows college athletics just because they enjoy the school colors. You want to associate yourself with a winner. You want the team that you're investing your emotions and your finances into to be successful. And I think that's really at the end of the day how people are judged. And, good, bad, or indifferent, people that don't win enough don't get to stay. It doesn't matter how nice they are. It doesn't matter what kind of car they drive or, how much they look in the eye when they shake your hand. If you're not winning ball games as an athletic director or as a coach or as a player, you're going to lose your job to somebody that can. And I think that's important to understand for everybody. No matter what everybody does on the fundraising side or what they do, marketing wise, the best branding you ever have is putting a winning product on the field.
100%. So Steve, explain to us what's next. where do they go from here? How do they start this process? What is the process for them to search out that candidate pool to bring the next John Cohen to Mississippi State?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that's something they're still figuring out. Dr. Mark Keenum was on retreat last week, got back on Sunday. Even before, the decision had been announced that John was headed to Auburn, Mississippi State already had some feelers out there, and every good leader already has, a short list, just in case, because you never know. I mean, that's just how you have to operate in life. You always have a list of people you want to hire in the event you have to, unexpectedly enter a hiring process. And so they're already involved in the process. There's already a committee of sorts that's already been assembled, and they're already vetting candidates and have reached out to some people to kind of see what their interest level is in Mississippi State. I don't think this is something that'll drag out, but I don't think it's something you got to do tomorrow because State doesn't have to hire anybody right away.
I've got another question that is going to take a right turn here, but I definitely want to get your thoughts on it. Who do you think they go after at Auburn? With John Cohen leading the ship, where do you think he goes?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of people have said, Lane Kiffin. Now, Lane is an obvious choice. I mean, now that doesn't mean that Lane Kiffin's going to have interest in Auburn. Now, Lane, of course, may feign some interest in Auburn to make sure that he gets the best deal for himself from Ole Miss or somebody else. But the issue with that is Auburn has got to turn this roster over quickly. They've got a lot of money in the bank when it comes to NIL. And so they're going to be very active in the transfer portal market. And so, I mean, could you argue against that Lane Kiffin has done the best job in the portal the last 2 years? And it's one thing to say it on signing day, but listen, Ole Miss is an 8-1 football team right now. And listen, I know it's going to be a difficult stretch in November, but they joke about the whole portal king type thing, but it's a truism. I mean, it's not just because of the fact that he did it on signing day and somebody printed a cute shirt. He's maximizing the potential of those players. So he's an obvious candidate. I just don't know what his level of interest would be. You know what I'm saying? I think that's because a lot of people say, oh, well, who are they going to get? Well, you may offer the job to somebody that's not interested in coming. And so that's one of the things I think with Lane, that'll be the issue there is how comfortable could they make him? But I don't think it'll be Dan Mullen. There's been a lot of discussion about that on message boards. I think Dan and John both have kind of been there and done that. So I don't think you'll see a reunion there between those two. But I do think whoever that John Cohen ultimately hires is going to be somebody that understands the science and analytics of recruiting, that understands the transfer portal and knows how to use NIL to their advantage. And so I don't think you're just going to go get an old ball coach and just kind of hope for the best. It's going to be a new generation coach who kind of embraces the direction that college athletics is going right now.
Yeah, Steve, my Ole Miss background, of course, I believe, and I want to believe that Lane and I are the same age. He may be 2 or 3 months older than me, but we want to believe that Ole Miss fans want to believe that, he's kind of put his roots in Oxford and with his daughter enrolled there and that kind of stuff. And I don't know if that's enough to, bolt him there, for the foreseeable future. But in my mind, I keep thinking Mark Stoops, but in today's world, Mark Stoops, I think he's probably plateaued, has done as much as he can do at Kentucky, and I know everybody wants a splash higher. As an Auburn fan, if I was an Auburn fan, I just wouldn't be, calling all my buddies excited if Mark Stoops got hired there. I mean, yeah, he's a work pail kind of guy, but he's not a flashy. He's not a Twitter king like Lane Kiffin or flamboyant like a Deion Sanders. And while he would be maybe a smart hire in yesteryear in the day of transfer portal and NIL, I don't know that Mark Stoops would be my guy.
Yeah, I think he's a great coach, but I don't know if he's a great hire for Auburn. You know what I'm saying? It's like He's a little bit subdued. He's a blue collar guy, so he would kind of fit that land grant institution mold. But I think you're right. I think you've got to go get a flash and dash coach that's going to galvanize your fan base and get everybody all fired up again. If there's ever a program that needed to make a splash hire, it's probably Auburn. I mean, can you imagine what an Auburn Tiger fan living in Montgomery, Alabama, or Huntsville, Alabama, has had to deal with for the last 10 years, knowing that your in-state rival has put together the greatest dynasty in the history of college football? We talk about, how difficult it is in Mississippi between State and Ole Miss, but at least it kind of goes in cycles, like one team will win a couple games, the other one will. So you got something to kind of look forward to thinking you'll turn it around. But if you're Auburn, if you're an Auburn fan, my goodness, man, I mean, just think about every day waking up with that on your mind. You're absolutely obsessed with Auburn, knowing that you're behind Alabama that far. And so I think the first thing John and those guys have got to do is go get somebody that these people can believe in. I mean, there were a lot of people that were good Auburn people that threw their support behind Brian Harsin, but there were a lot of other people that were just like, this is a weird fit for us. This guy's not going to make it. And they tried to fire him last year and just couldn't get him. And now he's gone, but he didn't get the opportunity to finish out the season. And so it's a very, in some respects, the Auburn donor culture is really very toxic. I mean, we all remember what happened, with Bobby Petrino, and they were trying to hire him, right behind Tommy Tuberville's back, and it was a very awkward situation. Tuberville, of course, bounced back, but I don't know that there is a situation anywhere in the Southeastern Conference, at least, where donors have as much say as they do at Auburn, and that's something that John's going to have to contend with, and whoever they hire as a coach. And I think in some respects that maybe makes that job a little less attractive.
Steve, that's something I wanted to mention as well. I don't know if you read this, but Syracuse put out a study starting from 2005 about the amount of money that has been spent on buyouts for coaches that essentially haven't gotten it done. And Auburn leads all schools north of $40 million. That's a
What did that include Kevin Steele? Remember they made that bad deal with Kevin Steele and had to buy him out too.
correct.
It's crazy.
And it brings me to my next question, and I hope you have some insight on this. Jimbo Fisher, I'm waiting for the hammer to drop on this because I feel like Texas A&M is essentially, I feel like their program is in the same boat as Auburn is right now, but just not as far down the road and ready to do anything with Jimbo Fisher. But what's it going to take for him to keep his job?
Well, I think he's safe next year regardless. I think my opinion is that they will probably put some pressure on him to give up play calling duties, bring in a true offensive coordinator, not just a quarterback coach. And I think there'll be some staffing changes. And, Durkin just got there and the guy's done a good job, and so, I think he's safe, but I think they'll make some changes on offense because they can't score. I mean, last time I looked, A&M had scored the least amount of points in the Southeastern Conference. It's like, and you look at the game last week against Ole Miss. I mean, they finally got above 24 points, and it seems like it's been forever and a day. And Jimbo's supposed to be some quarterback whisperer and some offensive guru. And I think a lot of that too is, in some respects, that I think he's kind of the Gus Malzahn of this cycle of coaches because Gus is always kind of an 8-4 coach, and you go back to Houston Nutt's years when he was at Arkansas, it seemed like he was playing for the West or playing for his job every year, and it seems like Jimbo's kind of following in that same path. And I think if you look at the struggles at Florida State, they didn't begin when Jimbo left. They began when Jimbo was still there. And of course, when you get a generational quarterback like Jameis Winston, much like Cam Newton did for Gus Malzahn, it makes you look like a much better coach than you probably are. And so I think that's kind of what they're dealing with. And listen, Ross Bjork makes decisions, based on his own information, but like giving him that extension last year and guaranteeing all that money, in hindsight, that looks really, really silly. So I think he gets next year regardless. But, those folks at Texas A&M aren't going to be patient, especially with Texas joining the league here in a couple of years. I mean, they're going to want to have a guy in place that's moving that program forward.
And Steve, it's so compounded with him, more so to me than any coach in recent history because he came from Florida State and he dominated, like you said, with a generational quarterback. And then he comes to Texas A&M and puts together arguably some of the best back-to-back recruiting classes ever. And as far as the 5-star and 4-star athletes, and this is what he's putting on the field. And that's why I just have to wonder, when does it get to that amount for his buyout that they say, we're done here?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what's interesting too, you talk about those great recruiting classes, but he hadn't put together a great quarterback room, and that's supposed to be, his position of expertise. And every time now, the kid that played last weekend against Ole Miss was really, really good. He wasn't good enough in the end, but that guy's a true freshman making his very first college starts. There's a little grace involved with all that. And I understand there's injuries and things like that, but when is the last time that Texas A&M has had a great quarterback? And you can say, well, Kellen Mond had a really good year in 2020, Yeah, as a senior, but how many mediocre seasons did he have, before he got there? I mean, it took him 4 years to get there, and that's just not going to work at Texas A&M. And there are a lot of people at A&M that think they should be Alabama. Well, if you want to be Alabama, you got to do the things that Alabama does to be Alabama. And they just hadn't done that. Recruiting is not everything. That's what there's so many people that misunderstand that. And it's not just about development. It's about evaluation. Yeah, you can go out there and go get a kid with 4 and 5 stars next to his name, but if he doesn't have the skill set that you require to move your offense or defense forward, well, you've wasted a lot of money. And I think when you look at this Texas A&M thing, it looks real good on paper, but then you put them on the field, and what are they averaging? 22 points a game? That's just not going to get it done.
Yeah, Steve, we've been through all of the off the field stuff. Man, before we let you go, if you don't mind, let's know what you think about this weekend's game. I mean, I know there's going to be some off stuff clouds a little bit, but as far as between on the gridiron, what do you expect to happen between State and State and Auburn?
Well, I felt like when the schedule came out, the State would win this game just because Auburn were hit so hard by the portal last year. They closed out on that losing streak and had so many kids leave. And so that roster, even though they added a few transfers, is kind of depleted of talent in many respects. And that shows up most weeks. I mean, they're the second lowest scoring team in the SEC. So I expected State to win. And now with the coaching change and things like that, you never know how they're going to come out. In some respects, it's kind of a detriment to State's game plan because you never know what they're going to do. I mean, you don't know who's calling plays. You don't know, what they're going to do trick play wise. They got nothing to lose. They're going to come out and play loose. But I think State coming off the bye week has been good. And I tell you this, guys, we had media opportunity today with players. It felt so good to be able to talk about a football game. You know what I'm saying? It's like after the last few days, all we've talked about is all this administrative stuff and off the field stuff and what's happening at Auburn. I'm eager to kind of put that in the rearview mirror for a while, and let's focus on a football game. And so, being around Austin Williams and those guys and Bookie Watson, that's what they talked about. They talked about Auburn. They talked about how well the team practiced today and felt it was one of the better practices of the season. And I think the bye week, kind of getting those guys healthy, has been good. And of course, they've got some players that have been injured that are returned this week. And State is a double-digit favorite as well. They should be. And I think State wins this game. I think it's probably a dogfight for a half, kind of similar to what we saw last week against Arkansas. But I think in the end, State will get into Auburn's legs, much like they did last year, and put that game away and cover the spread.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's Steve Robertson with the Boneyard Podcast. It's on genespage.com, but also he's got a book called Dogpile based on Mississippi State's 2021 National Championship baseball season. So y'all grab a copy of that, and we'll have some copies we're going to give away. But we're going to let Steve go and get back to his life because I know he's got to start early in the morning, and Derek and I will carry on for a little bit more. Steve, thank you so much for being with us, man. We appreciate it.
Hey, you guys, thanks for having me, and good luck with the show.
Thanks so much, Steve. So, a true insight on that and seeing what's going to happen with the remainder of that search. I think he's right. I think people are just they're kind of beat up about this. It's hot for 24, 48 hours. And then I think you get beat up about it. You want to get back to football. And you as a fan, I can tell you want to see State go in and beat Auburn, and you want to see them beat them handily.
Right. I agree with you. I think, if I could put it in an analogy, I would say losing an athletic director would be akin to getting dumped by a girl that you like. Losing a football coach like Tuberville when he left from Ole Miss to Auburn, that's like getting dumped by a girl that you're in love with. So there's two different levels there. It's not like Mike Leach left and went to Auburn, in the middle of the season. So at the end of the day, it is an administrator who has done a good job. You'd like to think that your next administrator, your next athletics director would come in and do a good job also, especially with the pieces that he has in place with Lamonis and with Mike Leach. And so it's not like your athletic department's in shambles just because John Cohen decided to, take another opportunity. So to my State friends, I wouldn't hang my head too low for too long. It'll be all right. It'll probably be all right. State beats Auburn, which I'm almost 100% sure they will.
I feel like they will too, and I think one of the most the sidebar to that is Cadillac Williams, one of the great running backs for Auburn, I would think, in recent history, is taking the interim head coach position.
I remember watching Cadillac Williams play. The first time I ever saw him play, it was obviously his freshman year at Auburn, his first game, and I was on vacation in Gulf Shores, and I was at a little beach bar having some fun and watching Cadillac Williams. I think that guy is going to be really, really good, because back then we weren't pounding our laptops, or at least I wasn't, about recruiting news and signing days and all that. We just, we got the Clarion Ledger and saw who came in, who the recruiting class was, and who we had, but we didn't really pay attention to what everybody else had. And so Cadillac, from all I understand, is a good guy, and I feel confident with Cadillac. I'd be shocked if he's not still there when the new staff comes in. I'd be shocked if he's not there.
We've got some crazy games this weekend with immediate impact. The top 4 playoff was just released. Tennessee being number 1, Ohio State being number 2, Georgia being number 3, and Clemson, I think, is a big shocker at number 4. I didn't think people were going to see it play out that way. With it being that way, you've got Alabama at LSU this weekend, which I think is going to be one of the biggest watch games. I know that Georgia and Tennessee are playing at Georgia, and it's not the primetime game, which I'm confused about that. I figured that would be a primetime game. The Alabama and LSU game playing in Death Valley is going to be the primetime game. And this sets up to be an immediate impact on that top 4 if Georgia can't pull this off at Athens. Being at number 3 and Alabama sitting at number 6, they can do a little bit here. And I think that going into Death Valley against the number 10 LSU and how they beat them would be an interesting scenario if Georgia loses this game to Tennessee this weekend.
Yeah, it's gonna. Well, this weekend's gonna muddy up the waters anyway, just for the 2 matchups you said. I think, I think Georgia beats Tennessee, and I could very well be wrong. As explosive as Tennessee is, and Hendon Hooker's playing as good as anybody in the country, I just think Georgia's roster is still better than Tennessee. Maybe not at all the skill positions. I know, if you put Hendon Hooker and Stetson Bennett at the combine, they wouldn't even make them run any drills. They'll just tell Stetson to stand over here and tell Hendon to go stand over there. But I think, 1 through, say, 44, 11 on both, 22 on both sides, Georgia still got a better roster, and the fact that it's in Georgia between the hedges, I would still think Georgia's going to win the game.
I think the key to this game between Georgia and Tennessee, huge Georgia fan, and I think if they can't do this, they lose the game. I think if Malachi Starks, their standout freshman cornerback, if he can't body up Hyatt and stop that combination, I think it's going to be a long night. I think it's going to be a shootout, and I just don't know if Georgia has the offense in the air to stay with Tennessee if it gets to that point to where Tennessee can move the ball up and down the field throwing it, because they're not going to run on Georgia. I'd be very shocked if they could pull that off.
Well, with you saying that, and Georgia better than anybody I know, I've just they better get the ball out fast. I know Tennessee's going to play in a hurry. They better get the ball out fast, because Georgia still has some studs on the defensive line, and they could make Hendon Hooker. He may not have time to throw those bombs that he's thrown before. So I'd be shocked if Georgia doesn't just pin their ears back and come at Hendon Hooker wide open.
This kid Hyatt for Tennessee, remarkable so far. Through 8 games, he's got 45 receptions, 907 yards, and 14 TDs. I mean, it's amazing what he's done, and that's why I feel like this is going to be the key to the game for Georgia. I feel like their fans are definitely going to have to play a part in creating some chaos as far as noise. So Tennessee doesn't have that comfort of what they have in the past, playing at home and just really beating the brakes off Kentucky. I mean, it was boys versus men.
Yeah, it's Kentucky's kind of plateaued. Will Levis is not playing as well as he and everybody else kind of thought he would. I think he compared Josh Allen's games to his, which really what he should have said was compared his game to Josh Allen's, or say that's who he tries to emulate. But I just, again, top, 44 players, 11 on each side, 22 on each side. I still think Georgia's better than Tennessee.
I think a lot of people are going to be comparing the Tennessee and Alabama game and seeing, saying that this is going to be very similar, and Tennessee's going to be able to move the ball against Georgia. But I feel like one thing that Georgia has that Alabama does not have, and it's what we talked about when State plays Alabama, is that if State could have pushed the ball down the field, the deep ball, or at least, not the intermediate ball. They had to go down the out routes. And I feel like that's where Alabama is at their weakness. And I feel like they were exposed against Tennessee with that. Sure. And it was a shootout. I don't think it can get to that point for Georgia. And if it does, I don't think Georgia can keep up with them, because I love Stetson Bennett, and he is accurate, but he is not as accurate within his long balls, and they haven't allowed him to air it out as much. He still has a remarkable completion percentage. It's still in the high 60s. I think it's like 68 right now. And he's great with the intermediate passes, but he's been off with his long ball down the field, and it's shown. And I feel like if he can't hit that and it does get into a shootout, obviously the game's over. And I feel like the key to this is going to be limiting those throws down the field, because they have such a stud at running back with McIntosh. He fumbled the ball last week and came in, and Coach Smart said that you could see it in his eyes. He was about to punish people, and he did when running the ball. So I feel like that's the key to Georgia. Run the ball early, control the clock, keep Tennessee off the field, and hopefully, I don't feel like you're going to have to roll any coverage to Malachi Starks to help him with Hyatt, because they're going to put Starks on Hyatt. There's no question.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears. Alabama at Death Valley. I'm pumped about this game.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge game. I still think LSU's youth, and Alabama's been so much better since the Tennessee game. That's one thing Nick Saban normally does. It's, most of his national championships have come with one loss on the record. I mean, maybe two of them were undefeated. I'm not 100% sure. But Nick Saban gets his coaches and his players to rebound from losses better than anybody in the country. And I don't see an angle where LSU beats them unless LSU's quarterback just has a fantastic day like he did against Ole Miss. I just Alabama's still Alabama to me, and is everything going to be leveling off? Absolutely, it is. Maybe not level, but it'll teeter-totter a little bit. I just like Alabama in that game. I expect Bryce Young to play well. I don't expect him to be rattled by the crowd, especially after Tennessee crowd. LSU fans don't want to hear it, but 100,000 still more than 88 or whatever it is the numbers are. So I'll still take Nick Saban over Brian Kelly, and with that talented roster of Alabama. And they're not going to be as focused as on just running the ball like Ole Miss was. So Alabama's going to run the ball and throw the ball, and I just think LSU's going to be in for a long night. I'm not saying it's going to be a 28, 35-point blowout or anything, but I think Alabama wins by 14-17, somewhere in there.
I think the LSU quarterback has turned things around.
Jaden Daniels playing much better.
Yeah, I think he's really put it together. What I fear is that he's just not going to have enough receivers to help him out.
Right. Well, they've got Keyshawn Booty's still there. I think he's
got Booty, and he's got Neighbors.
Yeah.
I just don't know if that's going to be enough for an Alabama team, specifically in a spotlight. To me, it just Alabama comes out and they show off They show off in the spotlight, and they got to a team with Tennessee who is firing off all cylinders. They're the best team in the country right now. There's no question about it.
They're definitely playing the best.
Yeah, when they played Kentucky, you saw their defense murdering people. You saw their offense rolling down the field. Man, wow. It scares me to have them come in on this type of role. But if a team is going to beat them, I feel like it's going to be a defensive team like Georgia. I don't feel like I think it's obvious that Alabama's not at their best. Their best with defense this year, and it landed them with a loss. But you've got Dustin Alford, Teddy, 88,000. It's 102,321. Bama going down.
Really? I'm sorry I missed that expansion. But he's a big LSU homer. That's everybody knows that. He dressed up as LSU coach for Halloween, for crying out loud. It was great though. Yeah, I just think that it's a talent and coaching issue, and Alabama bounces back from losses better than anybody. Not to mention, hey, I really need Alabama to beat LSU as far as an Ole Miss fan.
Yeah.
And then we got a little chore to do.
So talk about the standings with them. It's anybody's game right now if LSU wins this.
No, if Alabama beats it.
That's right. If Alabama wins, then you have
Alabama, Ole Miss, and LSU all with. No, if Alabama wins, LSU has 2 losses.
LSU has 2 losses.
Okay, right now, LSU, they're all 3 tied.
That's right. So you have.
As an Ole Miss fan, I need LSU to lose again because I don't need LSU and Ole Miss supposed to have 1 loss, which is crazy to say as an Ole Miss fan because LSU would obviously own the head-to-head tiebreaker. So what Ole Miss needs is they need Alabama to beat LSU, and then Ole Miss would have to beat Alabama.
Right.
In order and keep winning, obviously. But I tell you, man, this is the time of year where it gets so exciting, and man, right now you cannot tell me who's going to play in Atlanta. You can tell me a good guess.
Yeah.
You could tell me Tennessee and Alabama, but you can find 5 other people right down the road at a local bar that will give you different matchups. Just because it's not cut and dry this year.
And let's think about this. Let's think about this scenario, because this is 100% a possibility. Georgia loses this game this weekend, close one. They get pushed out of the top 4. And then it's Tennessee. It's Ohio State. It's Clemson now at 3. And then you have Alabama, depending on what they do, and TCU, depending on what they do, how they can slide into, number 4. But let's talk about this scenario. You could possibly have 3 teams from the SEC in the top 4.
Yeah, and that'll have to shake itself out because I don't think we'll see it before it expands. I don't think we'll see 3 SEC teams in the playoffs. It'll wind up being the most we get is 2, and I think that. So
now this depends on Michigan beating Ohio State.
Well, yeah, and Clemson still gets to play that ACC schedule.
Yeah.
Hey, didn't Clemson bench that DJ Uiagalelei, their quarterback?
Yes.
I wonder if he's starting this week. I don't know. I haven't checked into that. But talent-wise, that guy was supposed to be everything as far as recruiting goes.
Yeah.
But he's had some struggles. He was doing better earlier this year, but I think he got benched last week. If I'm not mistaken, or the week before. But
so halftime happies. Do you have the halftime happies ready?
Yeah, I'm gonna. Yeah. Halftime happy. I'm gonna say. Well, they don't have them ready yet. The casino doesn't. But if I think Alabama's favored by 12 or so right now. So I think there'll be 6.5 or so. I'll say Alabama's going to cover at halftime. It's as long as it's 7 or below, I would take Alabama. Remember what I said. That formula I said is if Alabama is favored by 13.5 or below, in the first half. I normally take them. Same with Georgia. I'm not going to change this week, only because of how successful I've been doing those in the past. I could go 0-2 this weekend. I wish we'd done a show last week because I went 2-0-1 and would have hit the parlay that I didn't put in like a dummy. But anyway, by the way, that was Tennessee first half, Georgia first half, and Ole Miss in the game, which was -3, which some places had a -2.5, which would have been 3-0. But I'll say Alabama first half, Georgia first half. You also got to take into effect the, not only the 102,000 at LSU, whatever Georgia holds, Hendon Hooker did get to play Alabama at Tennessee, so he's going on the road, and just whatever the line is on Mississippi State, just take Mississippi State. Mike Leach isn't the kind of guy to keep the foot on the gas just to do it, but I think they're favored by 12 or 13, whatever that is. If they're two touchdowns or less, I would take Mississippi State. Auburn, their players may rally for Cadillac Williams. You never know, but I just don't think they had the talent and the horses to keep up with that air raid offense of Mike Leach. So Mississippi State in the game, not just the first half, in the game. Alabama first half and Georgia first half, halftime happies.
What about straight lines? If you're going with the same games and you're going straight lines, do you think that one of the games I love, and I hate saying it, I just don't think I don't think Georgia covers that game. 8.5. I just don't think it's possible.
I do think it's possible. I mean, if you can slow Tennessee down, I mean, if you just for say, in the third quarter, Tennessee has 2 3-and-outs, which is very difficult to do, and you're ahead by 17 when they have those 3 3-and-outs, you still got a chance. So, Tennessee's proved me wrong this year, especially against Alabama, but it's the same thing for me, man. I'm just going to have to go with Georgia. -8.5, even though I would hope for it to come down, even though it went from 8 to 8.5. So I was thinking it'd come down to 7 by kickoff, but I'll still go with Georgia in the game.
And Ole Miss is off this weekend, right?
Yeah, they got to, thank goodness. I mean, 9 weeks in a row. Got to rest up for Alabama. Huge home game. Crowd's going to be crazy. Tickets are going for crazy money. I know somebody that sold their 3 tickets in parking pass and almost broke even on their season ticket cost.
Next. Give us the next lock. I want the next lock on it.
What, the next game?
Yep.
Let's see.
You've got Alabama, and I know you like Alabama, obviously. Do you think they have enough to go in there and cover that no problem? Was it 13.5 currently?
Yeah, I do. I think LSU's playing a little above their head. Although, Jaden Daniels is playing good, and they beat Ole Miss. Kind of. I'd say heads up kind of easily, even though they got off to LSU got off to a slow start. So, I just don't think. Top 44 players. Alabama's got the big edge. They'll have the edge in scheme. They definitely got the edge in coach, but that's why Brian Kelly came to LSU. I mean, he had plateaued at Notre Dame. You can only get him to the playoffs so many times without advancing or whatever. So he did what he had to do. Trying to find another game here. With Steve on, I didn't figure we would do these because I know he does. I know Steve doesn't like to do them. But yeah, let's see. And I do have, some teams that I normally kind of go with. Obviously, Alabama and Georgia first half, I do a lot.
What about the Clemson and Notre Dame game?
What time are they playing? Was that 11 o'clock?
I want to see Notre Dame beat Clemson worse than any game this year. I want to see Clemson weasel into the top 4 because I don't think they're a top 4 team. I think that their schedule does.
You want to see Notre Dame beat Clemson?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think it's a 5.
I think it's 6:30.
Okay, I think it's a 5-point
Yeah, it's down to 3.5.
Is it down 3.5?
Yeah, and it's at Notre Dame, so that tells me that they say home field's supposedly good for 3 points, and they're favored by 3.5, so they think that Notre Dame's a half point better. Notre Dame be ready to play that game, but I still think Clemson wins. I just don't see Dabo going up there and losing to a first-year Notre Dame coach. I just think
I don't think it's in the cards. I just would love to see it happen the first weekend of the rankings.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I would love to see. I would love to see Notre Dame muster it up just for one game.
And you know what? I haven't talked about this out loud or publicly or privately or anything, but I'm gonna tell you one thing that irks me about Notre Dame. And it's my personal opinion, so I probably shouldn't feel this way or share it. But during the COVID year, Notre Dame played an ACC schedule. And then after COVID's over, nope, we're going back to being independent. I'd be like, forget you. Either join us or not. That's what, if I was ACC, that's what I would have said before they panicked and let Notre Dame play that ACC schedule.
Right.
And I think they were eligible for the ACC championship, weren't they? What if they had won in the record books? Our championship was won by a team not even in our league. I mean, I know it was a money thing to have the Notre Dame brand, but eventually you got to be like Notre Dame. Either or get off the pot. What is you're not just going to use us? It's basically Notre Dame likes to play half ACC, half Pac-12, and sprinkle in some others. We know you want to be the big dog, but you're not. Just join the conference and win something.
Yeah,
I mean, they get one less game a year because they're not in a conference.
Right. And they don't get an opportunity to get knocked out of the rankings if they're already preseason ranked like normally they are.
Right, and that's how they've gotten in there and gotten their butts kicked, and that's one reason that Brian Kelly's at LSU, because you're not going to win a national championship at Notre Dame until you're in a conference. I don't think.
I agree. Man, we talked about this earlier. You got to love having, as a school, having somebody like Steve Robertson with the content that he brings, the accuracy that he brings. You can read whatever chat room you want to get into. You can read whatever website you want to go to, but the guy always reports the facts. And one of the things that, you and I were discussing earlier, Mississippi State's ability in the recent years, how this has transcended. And you and I are talking about how not a lot of schools have this aspect to the program. Mississippi State's marketing and their media department is phenomenal. And they have the best of the best, when it comes to the content that they share, having Steve being the insider, and you don't see a lot of schools have that guy.
Yeah, Steve's probably as connected to that program as anybody because, he loves Mississippi State. Steve's not gonna take a job to go cover Auburn, and not in a million years. I know people that cover other schools and that didn't necessarily go to that school, and that don't mean that shouldn't be a prerequisite of you covering that school. But it's certainly an added bonus when the person that's covering your school is covering your school is a all in heart and everything. But Steve's an honest guy. I like him. I think he does a great job, even though a lot of my Ole Miss friends may not like it. I've met him numerous times. I've read his books, except Dogpile. I own it, but I have not read it. I will.
Speaking of Dogpile, you have Mississippi State win the national championship in baseball. Then you turn around and you have Ole Miss win the national championship in baseball. What a hell of a run for Mississippi State and Ole Miss.
Yeah, it's, SEC, in my opinion, is already the far and away the most dominant baseball conference. I don't think anybody's really talked about it. I know I haven't. Do you think that the NIL's kind of canceled out the advantage that Vanderbilt has in baseball? I mean, the 11 2/3 scholarships that they give in baseball. Does NIL kind of erase that? Because I haven't heard anybody complain about it in the past couple of years.
I haven't either, and
I'm a big complainer about it. By the way, I'm not making fun of people that do because I'm one of them.
I complain about it.
Yeah, we should.
I don't like it. It takes away the purity of what these kids come in, and it's what separates people from watching. To me, it's what separated people from being an avid college fan versus an avid NFL fan, because you see these guys, they come in, this is the same song and same dance in the NFL. They get the contract and then they do nothing. It happens more times than not.
Right.
But what you love about college football is that these kids are pushing themselves. It hasn't been tainted yet by the money. Now, look, everybody knows that there's been under the table deals and all that kind of jazz.
Sure.
But now it's out in the open, and it's going to be happening more frequently than it did to more kids than it did. And what is a kid that's going to do? What is a kid going to do that comes from nothing? His family has nothing. He has nothing. And then you're throwing money at him. And how do you think those kids are going to respond? And more importantly, at 18, a lot of these kids, this is all they have. This is their shot to really make their way into the NFL.
Well, I've said for years, they ought to teach, especially after selling cars, they should teach finance in high school and credit and all those things. And even before NIL, but especially with NIL, I think all the schools owe it to these kids to teach them financial literacy. That just because you got $50,000 in the bank does not mean you can afford a $48,000 sports car.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way, because you can't even get insurance for a year with the other $2,000.
Right.
So I mean, I think the schools owe it. And I know they all got them on staff now. They have to on staff to to say, hey, this is what you got. This is what you need to do, and how not. No, they're not going to tell them what to do with the money. They may tell them how to handle it, because they were always been college kids on the budgets. Now they're just going to be college kids on bigger budgets, and they're going to see bright lights. And I'm sure there's more money being spent in Oxford and Starkville and Tuscaloosa by players now going out and kind of whining and dining themselves a little bit when they used to have other people doing it, which I'm sure other people still doing, and they should. But I just hope there's some financial literacy being taught along with this, because not, that old commercial, I think NCAA commercial said, there's so many student athletes and only a certain percentage are going pro, and they're all going pro in something, but only so many are going pro in athletics.
I think the financial literacy thing is something that's such a huge issue. I was speaking to a friend of mine who is very close with Mickey Loomis, and he asked him about the financial precautions they put in place. The NFL has made an enormous push to teach these guys how to manage their money.
They do it at the combine.
That's right. And they have people in place that are ready to help them out, and they just don't do it. They don't accept it. They continue to spend, and it's what drives them is to spend the money.
All right. Well, I'm not going to say his name out of respect for him and his family, but there was a guy that played locally. He played in the state of Mississippi college football, and he played NFL for a few years anyway. He was working at, I think it was Home Depot, but my in-laws were in there, and this kid, the dad recognized him, and the guy was working at Home Depot, and there was a father and son in there, and the son's 7 or 8 years old, and the dad said, hey, this is such and such. He used to play here, and then they played this team in the NFL, and the 7 or 8 year old said, and I felt sorry for the former player. He said, if you played in the NFL, why are you working at Home Depot? And not saying there's anything wrong with working at Home Depot, but we have the misconception that everybody has a $30 million contract, and that's just not the case. And regardless, if you're at the NFL minimum, which I think is what, $550,000 now, somewhere in there,
yeah,
you're still in a very high tax bracket.
Yeah.
So if you get a 4-year contract for $10 million, 2.5, I mean, if you're smart, that should last you the rest of your life. You got to invest it, and you're still probably going to have to do some work later in life. But it's not just rookie signing bonus and like it used to be, because you remember that the first round picks don't get what they used to.
That's right. They capped them.
Yeah, because you shouldn't have somebody coming in making more than Patrick Mahomes.
Look, Sam Bradford robbed the NFL.
He did.
It was the biggest. It was the biggest armed robbery in the world. I don't know what the numbers are. They were ridiculous.
Sure. I think he was the last one.
He was the last one, and he made out like a bandit. I mean,
I hope he mentions that in his prayers.
One of the things that Steve mentioned earlier that I can't help to think about is the name, image, and likeness deal, and how that might have affected, John Cohen leaving. I hate to come back to this, but it is on my mind, and more importantly than anything, right now I'm not upset that he left, because I am, I'm a diehard Georgia fan, but I'm so admirable of what he built at State.
Sure.
And now he's going to a school that is in bad. They're in bad shape, and I'm very curious to see who they go after with the coach. I that's the number. That's the peak of my curiosity right now.
Unfortunately, with who their Auburn's in-state rival is, I don't think it's possible to make a good hire at Auburn as long as Nick Saban is there. And I know that's kind of bold and clickbait and all that. That's just the truth. That your in-state rival is the gold standard. Still is. If Georgia wins another national championship this year, Alabama's still the gold standard.
I agree.
And so, does Lane Kiffin? I'm just saying, does Lane Kiffin want to go head-to-head with Nick Saban? I don't think so. I mean, he has to do it in the West as it is. But he's not constantly compared to Alabama right now.
Right.
I mean, if he keeps winning, he's going to, because people are going to be like, when are you ever going to beat him? Or that kind of thing. And I think who wants to go head-to-head with Nick Saban more than anybody to prove what he did before was not a fluke was Hugh Freeze.
I agree.
And, he's not going to be the splash hire that maybe he would have been a couple of years ago, but he's had to bide his time. He did sign a big extension with Liberty now.
He did, and it made him one of the highest paid.
Yeah, but Auburn can top that, and but Liberty can also top it too. People don't realize how much money Liberty has. They have a ton of money, and their alumni base is huge. But I think for competitive reasons, I think Hugh Freeze would relish that opportunity as much, if not more, than anybody.
Look, I think he makes sense there.
He does.
But I think you look in the climate that we're in. Everybody makes a mistake. They want to bury people. They want to tell them that they're done. They can't do this anymore. Get out of the sport. I don't see it that way. If life wasn't about second chances, none of us would be here.
And we get them every day.
Yeah, and I would love to see it happen. This would be so SEC to bring Lane Kiffin Hugh Freeze and put him at Auburn. It would ignite the SEC world.
As an Ole Miss fan, I'd love to play against Hugh Freeze.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary a little bit because of what he's been able to do. And, I think he's done his time. He may be happy at Liberty, especially with that amount of money. And I think they're 7-1 this year. Is that right?
Yeah, they're 7-1.
But, he's done an unbelievable job there. I think he'll do a good job at Auburn.
And who was their only – I think their only loss was to Wake Forest, right?
Is that right? Or is it Arkansas? Did they play Arkansas?
I don't think they played. I don't think they played Arkansas.
Arkansas beat somebody. But anyway, there's nonetheless, there's 7-1. And for my money, I like Hugh Freeze as Auburn's coach. I don't think that's the best odds out there, but I that's who I would like to see. Of course, I don't want to lose Lane Kiffin, and I don't know that I'd love for Deion to go, Coach Prime to go. I don't think he will, because I don't think they're going to relinquish total control of that program to him, and he's going to demand that wherever he goes, and absolutely he should.
I don't think that he could pull it off yet. I don't.
If they come in there, here's the thing. War Eagle becomes prime time if he goes there. I mean, it's
no doubt
that's a package deal. He'll be able to get better coaches, which he's got great coaches here. Imagine him getting those coaches a pay raise. But I hope for the city of Jackson. I hope Coach Prime stays. One reason I don't see Coach Prime leaving is because his son's still playing there. Of course, he can transfer in the transfer portal, but the way Shador's lighting it up the way he is, I don't see Coach Prime leaving Jackson State just yet.
Liberty's only loss was to Wake Forest by 1 point.
Wake Forest has a pretty good team.
Yeah, they do. Back to Coach Prime. I don't mean this in any disrespect because he knows football. I just don't see him being able to pull it off at a Power 5 school.
I disagree with you. I do. I think that if you let him come in there and do it his way, put his people, and in the world of NIL, I don't think there's any coach better prepared to handle these young men in college football than Coach Prime because he's been in the spotlight. He's been prime time before. I hate to say it, Lane Kiffin's never been prime time.
And now when that is a true statement. He is better prepared to speak to those kids on that behalf than anyone else. He has experienced that before it was even a thing. So I feel like he relates to players on that front. What I worry about is him going to a Power 5 school like that, like Auburn, and having a quarterback that he cannot relate to. It's easy to relate to your son. And the kid obviously has natural talent, and he's a good quarterback. I don't know if you get somebody like a Will Rogers, you get somebody like a Stetson Bennett that can relate to the guy who's not a quarterback coach,
right?
And I feel like if you're going to stay with the model of Cam Newton and that kind of RPO offense, I think he'll be fine. I think if you bring somebody in there that's a pure passer, I don't think it works.
Well, I just think Coach Prime has surrounded himself with such great coaches, and I think he'd do the same at the next level. I mean, I'm not saying he would bring his whole Jackson State staff. I think that he would bring in the best coaches that he can afford to pay, even if it's the ones on Jackson State staff. Very well could be, and he knows more than I do. I'm sure. I mean, I know, but I think he would treat it as a CEO position. And that's kind of what he's done at Jackson State. Yeah, he's hands-on. We see him. He leads the locker room. He does all those things. He's just he would treat it as a CEO, and you do your job. You do your job. Everybody does their job. And that's why I think he would be successful.
Well, I think it's hard to deny the fact that you would get every DB that's talented in the nation wanting to come learn from one of the greatest DBs to ever play in the NFL.
No doubt about it.
And that in and of itself puts you in every game.
Sure.
I feel like because I feel like the recruiting pool within Auburn, within Georgia, within Florida, Tennessee, Alabama, I feel like there's enough defensive players to make a line. Now, are you going to get, like you mentioned, are you going to get 4 5-star and 4-star defensive linemen like Georgia, like Alabama get? Maybe not. But I don't think you need that at Auburn to necessarily win football games. I feel like you need just to find that coach that can coach a quarterback and bring a team's defense back to where it was, because Auburn used to have a pretty good defense,
right?
And now it's everything's just kind of fallen by the wayside under Harsin.
Well, Jimbo's struggling with those 4 and 5-star defensive linemen scoring touchdowns. I mean, you can stockpile them till you're blue in the face, but they're not going to run, throw, and catch the ball.
I agree.
And they stopped the other team from doing it, but at some point you got to have some good skill players. And
do you share the same excitement with me that? And I don't know if it's just wicked or not, but I do want to see him lose. I do want to see what it's going to take to get him bought out. And only for the sheer fact of his contract. It's not because I want to see him fail. I just want to see another school buy out a coach at that level of money that they've been buying out. It's getting to be incredible.
I want to see the buyout system fail, and unfortunately, he's the poster child for it right now.
Yeah.
Except for maybe, there are some teams with Dabo Swinney's got a bigger buyout. There's a couple that have bigger buyouts. But those guys are not in Kirby and Dabo both have larger buyouts than Jimbo, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm not, I could be wrong, but I don't want to. It's not a personal thing against Jimbo. I want to see that buyout system fail.
Yeah,
we've got to quit. I say we, college football in general, got to stop rewarding people for not performing. Your reward is the fact that we're paying you $10 million a year or $8 million or whatever it is. That's your reward. And if you don't win, we've got to make a decision, just as any other performance job in the country.
Well, let me put this back on you. When they come to these coaches and they're interviewing them and then, they're negotiating the contract, these coaches put this in there.
Jimmy Sexton puts it in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is it going to take to break the trend where a college says no? Because all of the Power 5 schools have it in play. You have your Ogeron,
Yeah.
16, 17 million?
Yeah.
And what's it going to take for the universities to say no way? Or do they feel like it's the only way that they can get the good coach if they get the guaranteed money?
Yes, I think so. The guarantee, the buyouts. I think that's, it's, and I'm not going to go political, but that's why a lot of states get these corporations, because you give them tax breaks for so many years. Yeah, you don't have to pay any state taxes for 20 years if you come here. And that's the same thing they're doing with buyouts with coaches. And I don't see an end in it. I just hope it would end, because it's getting ridiculous, and it's going to get to the point where, every alumni base has only got so many millionaires.
Right.
And so now you got to fund buyouts and collectives. It's, I have friends that make, a lot of money, and they still, eyes get big when they see their kids' Christmas list.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening. This Christmas list is getting really big too fast for, even people that are worth $100 million.
It's the Wild West right now with it. And I think we kind of knew this. This is something that we touched on off air, that this was going to get worse before it got any better. And it's going that way, getting worse as we speak.
Yeah. Well, I know we got to get out, but I'm also not a big fan of municipalities and state governments and taxpayers paying for pro stadiums for one of the richest things in the world, the NFL.
Yeah.
Build your own stadium.
Right. You're a billionaire.
So I have to pay for your stadium, and then I got to come buy a $10 beer from you. No.
Yeah. Specifically the Chicago Bears, who are trying to get out of Chicago right now, who have sucked for so many years.
That's what they do. They dangle it. If you don't get us a new stadium, we're leaving.
Yeah, leave.
Leave.
You suck.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to come watch your game.
Yeah, we need to blow this old stadium up anyway. It's an eyesore.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, and blow it up with the team inside. I mean, that's how bad they are.
Yeah, and by the way, you can't be the Bears.
Yeah. Well, look, I've enjoyed it, Teddy.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Let's not forget, everybody, like and share the page and the show. We've got 10 books that Steve has personally signed, Dog Pal, that really, gets into the run that State made, and it was really an incredible run, and one of the most memorable in my history of watching baseball, which has been 30 plus years. The teams that they went through to bring home the championship was remarkable. The series that they went through it was like every series just got better and better. You just didn't think it could get any better. And then they pull it off against Vanderbilt. And I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't think they had the pitching to do it. I didn't think they had the rest to do it with their pitching staff. That team was something special. And I think the book really depicts that.
Yeah. And it also, it delves back in the program history. Steve did a great job of going back and looking through things and talking to a bunch of people, and so it's not just all about that season. It builds up to the culmination of everything. The history of the program, and with Coach Ron Polk and all the former players that were there and a part of it, and it's a cool thing. But yeah. So we're going to give away 10 of those.
Yeah, we're going to give away 10. So
you have to like and share
and tag 5 friends.
Okay, and
tag 5 friends on there.
Go tag 5 friends and help this show grow. And if you want us to talk about something, let us know in the comments, and we'll talk about it next week. If you want to ask a question and get my ridiculous dumb take on it, I'd be glad to give you my ridiculous dumb take.
And don't forget Teddy's Peanuts, which I ordered 2 more gallons of this weekend, which were unbelievable.
Thank you.
Look,
season's winding down. Y'all get them.
Man, I really appreciate it. I enjoy it so much. This is one of the best nights of the week for me, and I really had a good time with Steve tonight and yourself. So don't forget to like and follow the page. Everybody, Teddy McCraney, go to his page, follow him. He updates everything with his peanuts. You buy them, he delivers them to your front door, and they are remarkable. We have people that have literally called and asked if they can freeze these or how do they ship them overnight out of state.
Sure.
I'm telling you, they're phenomenal. Nothing you cook is terrible.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Guys, appreciate it, and we'll